This is the Glenn Beck Program.
We are happy to welcome Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker to the program, a guy that we have been watching now for quite some time, and he seems to be cut from exactly the right cloth for what the country needs. He has taken a deficit of $3.6 billion and turned it into a surplus. Not something that anybody could have foreseen.
These are things that media don't talk about either.
Yeah, I know. And also went after the unions in Wisconsin in the cradle of progressivism and won. Welcome to the program, Governor Walker.
Hey, Glenn, thanks for having me on. Glad to be with you.
Thank you. So forgive us for for being a little skeptical of somebody coming from the cradle of progressivism and being the savior for the country. But being from Madison, Wisconsin, and being around this, does this make you more predisposed to it or easier for you to see it coming?
Oh, deep under fire, battle tested. I think there's days when I have extra layers of battle armor on there. You're right, Madison, Wisconsin, which is kind of to the left of Pravda. For many out there, it is the home of the progressive movement, the home of AFSCME was started there, collective bargaining was started there. Heck, sadly, after this last week, it was the state that had the first income tax. Who would have thought that in that city, in the state of Wisconsin, that hasn't gone Republican for president since 1984, we would be able to take on 4 years ago the public employee unions and not only win that battle, win the recalls against a whole bunch of state senators, win a recall against me and the lieutenant governor in the state. But now Wisconsin is not only when it comes to public employee unions, we have no seniority or tenure. We can hire and fire based on merit. We can pay based on performance. We're the 25th state in the nation to have right to work. We have photo ID requirements for voting. We've defunded Planned Parenthood and pushed pro-life legislation.
Good
God. Concealed carry and cancel doctrine. We've cut taxes by $2 billion. In fact, property taxes are lower today than they were 4 years ago. Who would have thought all that happened? But we said shortly after the 2010 election we had to go big and we had to go bold, and it was put up for shut-up time. And even in Madison, Wisconsin, we were able to get that done.
I have to tell you, I'm having a hard time believing that it was actually done. You say who would have thought we could get it done? I'm having a hard time believing that you did get it done. What is the secret?
Well, you know, the interesting thing in the last election was similar to the two previous ones, because of course I've had three in the last 4 years for governor. Was we won with almost universal support amongst Republicans, 96%. That means Tea Party to Chamber of Commerce, social conservatives to Libertarian. 96%. The only other governor close to that is Terry Branstad with about the same. But yet, in my state, that's not enough. We had to win amongst independents by 11, almost 12-point margin. You know, the interesting thing is, to win the center, you don't have to move to the center on the issues. You have to lead. You have to clearly spell out what you're going to do, tell the people what you're going to do, and then do it. And a lot of times in politics, people think that to win the middle, to win independents, that somehow independents are squishy or moderate. No, most independents have just been burned many times before. They're not willing to commit to a party because they're frustrated with being told one thing and then people doing another thing. If you lead, you don't have to be with an independent on every single issue. You just got to look them in the eye and tell them exactly what you're going to do. And sometimes that means telling them something that they don't necessarily agree with, but they'll know on all the other issues that you're going to stand firm when they do care about them.
Well, you're singing to me. Help me out on. I'm one of those independents. I hate the Republican Party, and mainly because I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me, and left millions of Americans. They do absolutely say one thing and do the exact opposite. I'm against John Boehner. I won't vote for John Boehner. I'm voting for John Boehner. I'm against high deficits. I won't vote for high deficits. I voted for high deficits. I understand war, and I'm not going to pussyfoot around, and we're going to go in and we're going to win, except I voted to do the exact opposite. And I'm just sick of it. How do you get people like me to believe that a guy like you, who can get the establishment, how do you get people like me to believe you're not one of those guys who's with the establishment and and you're going to get to Washington, and you're going to become the establishment.
No, that's a great point. And I think there are a lot of people. In fact, I remember the press in my state back in the fall of 2010 after the elections, and I started announcing things that we were going to do. And we pushed back, for example, on an $810 million boondoggle of a high-speed train line between Milwaukee and Madison. We pushed to have it killed, and they were shocked because I said I was going to do that in the campaign, and they were shocked even before taking office we were actually doing that because, again, the media and in turn the public so often believes that politicians say one thing and kind of wink, wink, and do something different. In our state, I remember it was literally a week after the election in 2010, November 2nd, 2010, a week after that, we brought all the Republicans who'd just been elected together as well as those in the legislature who were already there. And I sat down with them in the Capitol, wide open caucus, and said, everything switched. We went from all Democrat to all Republican control in our state, both legislative branches, governor, lieutenant governor, new U.S. Senator Ron Johnson, did all these things. And I reminded them all that if we just nibble around the edges, kind of what you're alluding to, if we just a little bit less bad than the other side, the voters have every reason to throw us out of office 2 years later. They said it is put up or shut up time. It is time to go big and then go bold. And I don't think anybody looking at what we've done in Wisconsin over the last 4 years would say that we didn't heed that call. And that's how do you do in Washington.
How do you do that with a system that is so entrenched, a system that has so much control and is so corrupt?
I think you have to take it head on. It has to be literally part of the debate and the discussion in a campaign. I think the next president, we're going to have a Republican president. The next president has to clearly lay it out. One of the big mistakes I thought, Mitt Romney's a good man, would have been a much better president currently. One of the huge mistakes made in the last presidential election was they made the focus entirely about being against Barack Obama. And there obviously are plenty of problems with the president, don't get me wrong. But they never really communicated effectively to the American people what they were for. I think in this case, we talk about reform. I don't mean just nibbling around the edges. I think in Washington, we need to dismantle major portions of the federal government, not just in Medicaid, but other social services and workforce development, transportation, heck, even in education. We need to take those dollars and send them back to the states. Get it out of Washington. Get it back to the place where it's smaller in size and where it can be more effective, more efficient, more accountable to the taxpayers. Take on major things like broad sweeping repeals of major regulations in the federal government, taking that power away early on within the first 100 days when there's still a bit of a honeymoon and still a bit of a reminder of what the American people have voted for. Those things you have to act on. And I think not just in Wisconsin, but you look at Michigan, you look at Indiana, you look at Ohio, you look at Florida, you look at states across America that did those sorts of things early on, and certainly we were the quickest, but others followed suit. Those are the states where conservative, common-sense reforms are working today, and our states are better because of it. We can do the same thing for America.
Okay, so you're saying all the right things, and you've done a lot of the right things. You just said that you thought we should dismantle even some of the educational infrastructure. You've taken on the unions in Wisconsin on education, but you're seemingly a little non-committal on Common Core. Will you sign, if it comes to your desk, a full repeal of Common Core in Wisconsin?
Oh, absolutely. I proposed it in my budget. I mean, years ago, before I was governor, the previous legislature, previous governor, and the superintendent of public instruction, which is an independently elected position in our state, enacted this. It wasn't something on our radar screen when we first ran in 2010. But a few years ago, when we heard from parents, when we heard from conservative educators, and aren't many, but others out there like that raised concerns, we drafted legislation to repeal it in the state. Unfortunately, at that time, the state legislature didn't bring it up. But I put that in my most recent budget, was repeal a prohibition on requiring any school district in the state to do that. And we took all the money out for the Smarter Balance Test, which is the essence of how Common Core advocates use that. So we've taken that out. To me, we will do anything legislatively we can. I'll sign it.
Is that because the people are leading, or do you personally believe that it's wrong?
Well, I personally believe that, but it's something where, in this case, it 2000. I guess was early in 2013. And again, this isn't something when I first ran was even on my radar screen. It wasn't something I was fully aware of. I fully acknowledged that. But as we heard from parents, as we heard from concerned citizens, as we heard even from many teachers about this is when we went ahead and drafted language and took the lead on that. Worked with people like State Senator Leah Vukbeer and former State Senator Paul Farrell to try and get this changed. And now we just put it flat out in our budget because we knew that one piece of legislation has to pass, and we wanted to repeal Common Core going forward.
Well, we are talking to Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, 2016 GOP presidential hopeful, and
potentially
that is exactly the way I feel so far. Halfway through this interview, I feel hopeful as well. Sounds like another great candidate. We'll come back with a few more minutes with Governor Scott Walker in a minute.
The Glenn Beck Program.
The Blaze Radio Network.
Are you looking to save 50, 60, even...
You're listening to the Glenn Beck Program.
We are privileged to have Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker with us till the end of the hour. And Governor, I hope that you understand that. Let me start here. I ask audiences all the time, how many people believe things today that they would have thought was crazy 10 years ago? And how many people want to believe some of the things that you believe today? We all believe things now we don't want to believe. We all think things now we don't want to necessarily think. But we have been so badly burned by politicians detaching themselves from common sense and out lying to us on both sides of the aisle that the average person is really getting fed up and they're just done. And that's really dangerous. And so when we are trying to re-engage, I think we have maybe one more re-engagement left in us to really buy into somebody. And if this person betrays us, it's not going to end well. And so when we look at things like, for instance, your stance on immigration, I want you to say it, but people will call us and say, he's flip-flopped. Well, that was a long time ago that you had this, stance. And I want to give you the opportunity to talk about it because it might make sense. But then again, you might be lying to us. So help us out.
Yeah.
Because we want to believe.
No problem. Well, as I said, I think when Chris Wallace a few weeks back was asking me when I was on Fox News Sunday, he asked me about this. And he said, so have you changed your position or from at least some of the views from more than a decade ago? And I said, yeah. I think the American people not only want people that stand firm in issues, they want people who listen to folks who've got rational thoughts. And for me, a lot of it was talking to not only citizens across the country, but particularly to governors in border states who raised real serious concerns about what's happening on our border and elsewhere. So,
can you tell us one? Can you tell us one example of something that you heard or somebody you talked to that you went, you know what, I'm wrong on this?
Well, when I talked to Greg Abbott, for example, I went to the border. He'd asked me to come. I went there a few weeks ago, and I don't know if it was something directly wrong, but it was just not a full appreciation for what's at risk along our border. I knew there were people coming across the border, but really what you have is much greater than that. You have international criminal organizations, the drug cartels that aren't just smuggling drugs, they're smuggling firearms, they're smuggling not only humans, but human trafficking in horrific situations. And it's an issue that's not just about safety or even national security. It's about sovereignty. If we had this kind of assault along our water-based ports, the federal government would be sending in the Navy. And yet there's a very minimal force along our nation's land-based borders, be it in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, or California. And so to me, it was clear far bigger than just immigration. We need to have a much greater investment from the federal government to secure the border through not only infrastructure but personnel and certainly even technology to do that and to make a major shift. If you don't do that, there's much greater issues than just immigration. There's folks coming in from potentially ISIS-related elements and others around the world. There's safety issues in terms of the drugs and the drug trafficking and the gun trafficking and other things in that regard. But to get to immigration, you've got to secure the border, because nothing you do to cramp down on immigration works if you don't fundamentally secure that border. Then I think you need to enforce the law. And the way to effectively do that is to require every employer in America to use an effective E-Verify system. And by effective, I mean if we're going to require particularly small businesses and farmers and ranchers, we got to have a system that works. But then the onus is on them as employers, and the penalties have to be steep, so that they're only hiring people who are here, who are legal to be here. No amnesty. If someone wants to be a citizen, they have to go back to their country of origin, get in line behind everybody else who's been waiting. And then in terms of legal immigration, what we need to approach that going forward is saying we will make adjustments. The next president and the next Congress need to make decisions about a legal immigration system that's based on, first and foremost, protecting American workers and American wages, because the more I've talked to folks, I've talked to Senator Sessions and others out there, but it is a fundamentally lost issue by many in elected positions today, is what is this doing not only to American workers looking for jobs, but what is it doing to their wages? And we need to have that be at the forefront of our discussion going forward.
Tell me about the Middle East and your stance, and we've only got a couple of minutes here, but your stance on Israel, Iran, and ISIS.
Well, let's contrast this with the president. The president drew a line in the sand and allowed it to be crossed, who called ISIS the JV squad, who called Yemen a success story, who calls Iran a place we can do business with. He is fundamentally wrong on each of these issues, and Hillary Clinton is wrong for advising on this. We need to reestablish our relationship with Israel as a strong ally. We need to pull back from these discussions with Iran, which are abysmal, not only because they have the potential to be nuclear armed, but because they still continue to support terrorist-related activities, not only in the region, but around the world. We need to do what's required to take on ISIS, be it not just in Syria, but now we see more stories, sadly, out of Libya, where again, they're taking on, I mean, this is specifically based on religion. They're killing either through beheadings or shooting Christians, just as they did with Egyptian Christians. This is something we need to tell the American people, look them straight in the eye and say, this is not a short-term issue. This is a generational issue. It requires a commander-in-chief who identifies radical Islamic terrorism as a threat, will identify that, take the fight to them before they bring the fight to us.
I'm concerned that we are, at the beginning, we're following the pattern of the 1930s, and Putin is following the patterns of Hitler, and we're seeing all of the same seeds happen. And then we have an economic system that is out of control. We're printing money, or we're digitizing money. Any kind of tax incentives that brings that money rushing back into the country is going to cause all kinds of problems. How do you get that under control is beyond me. And more importantly, you have a breakdown of faith in our institutions, a breakdown of society, really, and our culture. The next president has the potential of walking into the least popular office in the world. Why do you want to be president?
Because I've got two sons, and for the same reason, if I were to jump in this race for the same reason I jumped in the race for governor, because I got two sons, Matt and Alex, and I wanted them to grow up in a state that was at least as great, if not greater, than the one I grew up in. It's the same thing I want for them and their generation, for America. And I know it can be done. In my lifetime, the best president when it comes to fiscal, economic, and foreign policy issues was a governor from the state of California who fundamentally stood up and led. In my lifetime, the worst president when it comes to economic, fiscal, and foreign policy decisions was a freshman senator from Illinois. And the difference was one knew how to lead. One knew how to stand up and define what it took to turn America around. And I think with the right leadership, we can make this country great yet again.
That was the most deftly crafted slam on Rubio, Cruz, and Paul I think I've ever heard. One last question, Governor. Tell me the meaning or worth of your soul and its care. How's your soul?
My soul is well. One of the great things about all that I've tried to do in elected office is to do it for not for title, certainly not for fame or fortune, but because you believe it's a calling. And that's part of the process I'm involved right now, is trying to discern whether or not a run like this is a part of a calling for me and for my family. It helped us 4 years ago in the height of the 100,000-plus protesters, knowing that we weren't there for the title. If it was just for the position, I might have walked away. But because we knew it was a calling to turn our state around, we were willing to hunker in and do the right thing. And again, if we did this, it would have to be because it was a calling.
Your wife, you have come under attack, unlike really most people have come under attack. You have had death threats. You have had people surround your home or your parents' home. Your kids have come under attack. There's not very many people in the country that have come across the kind of evil that you guys have come across. How's your wife doing?
For a family, for Tonette and I, and for Matt and Alex, our sons, you go through, not just in politics, but anywhere in life where you go something as challenging, as horrific as that, it can do one of two things. It can pull you apart. Sadly, there are examples. Many families across the country have gone through difficult things, and they've drawn apart. In our case, thank God, it pulled us closer together. It drew us together. We're stronger than ever. My wife has been out with me in New Hampshire over the weekend on the stump. My kids are actually looking, if we make this official, to literally take a semester off from school and go around the country. They're excited about it. They feel called to be a part of it as well. And it's something where, in the end, we don't know that, even if God calls us to get in the race, it doesn't necessarily mean he's calling us to win it. President Lincoln said it right, obviously, more than 150 years ago, when he said, God doesn't pick sides in elections. He calls us to be on his side. And so we just try to determine every single day how best to be on his side and let the rest work itself out.
Have you had the conversation, the two of you in bed at night, that you are the JV team right now, and what you're headed for, if you would win, is exponentially worse?
Oh, it is. In a weird sort of way, looking back around the holidays, we realized that the last 4 years maybe was a little bit of providence preparing us for what lied ahead, certainly going from a governor's race to a recall to the re-elect where you're number one target in the country, certainly moved us up and prepared us in some way. But it is 1,000 times more intense should we get in the campaign, and certainly even more intense when it comes to leading this country. And that's why, again, I don't think if you really look at it, the closer one gets, you realize you got to be crazy to want to be the president of the United States. If you just want it for the title, you really almost have to be crazy if you know what faces you and your family. The only way you should pursue it is if you feel called to, that you believe you can make a difference, you believe you can help improve the lives of every American, and allow people to get back to a path where working hard, playing by the rules, allows everyone in this country to live their piece of the American dream. That's what people want. We're not Democrat or Republican. We are really fundamentally as people who yearn to believe. I think even for those people, not all, but for most of the people, even dependent somewhat today on the government, they don't want to be. They know that none of us wake up, or certainly not even just wake up, none of us grow up thinking, hey, someday when I grow up, I want to become dependent on the government. And for those who come here illegally from other countries, they don't come here because they want to become dependent on the government. They know it's one of the few places left in the world. It doesn't matter what class you were born into. It doesn't matter what your parents did for a living. In America, you can do and be anything you want. We need to restore that American dream for everyone.
Governor, it is great to talk to you, and I know our audience has been waiting to hear from you for a long time. I know it's been hard to get you on. Between our internet, our television, our radio, and everything else, we have about a footprint of about 50 million Americans, and these Americans are hardworking. They believe in the American dream. They believe, which the American dream is not a house and a car. The American dream is the right to be able to pursue your own happiness, and they are anxious to find somebody they can believe in. So I would hope that your team would not write these hardworking people off. Because they have really been anxious, as have we, to be able to hear you really speak, and not in a confrontational way, not in a gotcha kind of scenario. Just speak from the heart and provide some leadership. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, we look forward to coming on plenty more times. And you're right. Just the last thing I'd add on that, the American dream in its essence, it goes back to our founding principles, is not only to be able to pursue to live in a land of freedom and pursue happiness, but equally as important to be able to pass it on to your children, your children's children. That's what really people want in their heart, despite what others in the liberal media say. That's what people want. We're going to keep talking about it. We appreciate your leadership pursuing that, and we'll keep coming back on.
God bless you, Governor Scott Walker. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Awesome.
Well,